Abby, and I'm here with an update on my Reading Around the World challenge. So in this video, I'm going to talk about Canada. So as I've mentioned in a previous video, Canada being such a large landmass and also having so many different cultural kind of hubs and values within it, I want to read from each of the provinces and territories. So I have divided it up into those places. For Alberta, I read I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shraya. I borrowed this from the library and I listened to the audiobook, so she narrated it herself. And this is a essay, kind of an essay collection. It's mostly just like one essay about why she, as a trans woman, is afraid of men. It also entails some of her experiences both before she transitioned and also her relationship with her partner after transitioning, and just kind of thoughts on what it's like to be a woman but who is also able to be perceived as a man, and how, depending on how she has done her makeup or is projecting her appearance, how she's treated very differently, and how that is terrifying for her. How she knows that she can present more masculine and have a very different experience walking alone at night or going to different events than when she is presenting as herself and it feels comfortable in her skin. And this was just a really interesting collection to kind of find out from a trans woman what it meant for her. And she's also very forthcoming in talking about how this is her personal experience, and obviously it's going to be different for different trans people, but it was a really good collection and I highly recommend it. It's very short, so an easy read in lengthwise, but a complex read in topic-wise. For Manitoba, I read Sugar Falls, a residential story by David Robertson. And this graphic novel starts out with a framed story of a boy who needs to do a presentation and needs to interview someone about their experiences. And so a friend of his has a grandmother who went to the residential school, and although the story in the way that it's told is fictional, it follows very closely the life of Betty Ross, who was an elder from Cross Lake First Nation and did have this experience. The drawings are very sparse. So I read the original black and white version. It has since come out again in color. There's a color edition, but the illustrations by Scott B. Henderson make it very clear what's happening, show a disconnect of the woman's experiences at her home with her family versus her experience at residential school, and what it was like to be a child who's trying to navigate this change in what you've been told and how you've been brought up. And the book obviously deals with the things that happened at residential school, so the physical, mental, emotional, and sexual abuse. I would say that this book is able to be read by a younger audience because things are more so hinted at rather than outright, like it's not graphically depicted. We know what's happening as adults. We are aware of the things, but in the story, the way that it is formatted, it's like, oh, this guy has come to see her in the middle of the night, and then everything happens off screen. So it's able to be read by a younger audience and to start having those discussions about the things that happen, but the graphic novel itself is not of a graphic nature. And I think a lot of that attributes back to the fact that this is a real story and these traumas did happen to these people, and that even the woman within the story telling this story, it's still traumatic to her. She needs to be able to see her surroundings, feel comfortable in her home as she's relaying this story to the teens who are interviewing her. And it was a very powerful story. The images of the young girls having their hair cut and put into different outfits and just essentially having their identity fully wiped out, and what that means as an adult looking back on those experiences and trying to reconcile those things. So I would recommend this for everyone. I would say starting at a late middle grade level would be an appropriate time to look at it, but again, do your own research into the content warnings and whether that's the right time to introduce it or not. Robertson himself is a part of the Norway House Cree Nation. For Ontario, I read 2 children's books by Julie Flett. I read Birdsong and We All Play. Julie Flett does the illustrations herself, and she is part of the Cree Métis tribe. And she, in this first book, Birdsong, has a young girl who has had to move across country to a new place, but she befriends an older woman next door. It has lots of beautiful images of playing out in nature and creating these bonds and learning to experience things both with your eyes, but also learning from those who have come before you. And then We All Play is an exploration of how we are all similar, how people and animals and just all are one with nature, and how we all play. And so this book goes through and compares children playing to animals playing. This book is nice because it also includes Cree words with a glossary in the back, and so it is a nice exploration of language as well as nature. For Nova Scotia, I read Africville by Shanti Grant, and the pictures are done by Ava Campbell. And this book explores Africville, which was located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and was a community of people who were fleeing slavery, both in the United States and people who came from Jamaica, Black loyalists, and they had a whole community here. And this little girl in the story is going to experience this community. She's going to see the different things that the people do in society. And so we have these beautiful illustrations of the kids playing and people fishing and just the kind of daily life of this town. And then we get to the end of the book and find out that in 1960, the government came through and just tore it all down. They sent the people living there to different places throughout Canada, and it's been a battle until 2004. They looked at rebuilding the church on the original site. But the people here were paying municipal taxes, and they had a flourishing community in this area. And the government just decided to come through and get rid of that. And so this was really interesting in that I've never heard of this town or this happening, even though I'm only like 7 hours away from here. And I think more people need to keep learning history of both Canada, the United States, and any other colonizing places, and kind of what happened as the government went through and different wars happened and people kept getting displaced and those things. So definitely check this out. It is a very powerful children's book, and one that, again, you have the pictures throughout that are all nice and easy to read to kids, accessible that way, and then you have the part at the end which you are then able to hear the real story and get that background for teaching or talking with your kids about the story. For Prince Edward Island, I read Anne of Green Gables. I have read the first 3 and the 5th one so far. I don't really know how I skipped over the 4th one. And Anne of Green Gables, I have just my little copy here. Anne of Green Gables follows a young orphan as she is accidentally sent to this family who's looking for a boy to help them out on the farm, but she wins them over with her curiosity and love for nature and just big emotions, and so they decide to keep her. Because this story was originally published in 1908, it is an older book, but it captures the beauty of this particular area in Canada and the different things that people did to survive. It also has that very small town feel, with people having to go miles and miles to get a doctor out in the middle of the night, things like that. And so it's still worth a read. As the series goes on, it gets into things like gentrification. If you watch the new show Anne with an E, we also look at things like residential schools and the different things that were happening in that area during the time. But the book itself is about a little girl with a huge imagination who warms the heart of an old brother and sister who just never quite got around to finding people to marry and move away from their farm. And so we have a good look at what it's like to grow up on a farm in a very rural community in Canada. And there we go, the first 5 provinces of the Reading Around the World Challenge. Tune in for more and leave any book recommendations in the comments.